The restaurant was buzzing with quiet elegance, clinking glasses, hushed laughter, and the kind of polished charm that only the rich and powerful could afford. Tucked away in the corner, dressed in jeans and a simple jacket, sat a man who didn't quite fit in. He looked like any other customer, polite and low-key. But beneath that casual look was a truth no one around him knew. He was a billionaire, undercover by choice, watching the world through a different lens. Across the room, a young Heiress entered, heels clicking, head held high, radiating the confidence of someone who had never heard the word no. She was the daughter of one of the country's wealthiest families, and tonight, she wasn't in the mood to be nice. Her sharp eyes scanned the room with boredom until they landed on a waitress, a kind-faced woman wearing a delicate old pendant around her neck. That's when it happened. The Heiress tilted her head, her voice loud enough for nearby tables to hear, and scoffed, "That pendant looks like something pulled from a thrift store dumpster." The words hit like a slap. The waitress froze, the smile on her face faltering just slightly, but she held her ground with quiet dignity. The billionaire watched it all unfold, his expression unreadable. He wasn't just here for dinner. He had chosen this restaurant for a reason. He was studying people, not their bank accounts, but their hearts. And what he saw tonight stirred something in him. The pendant wasn't just jewelry. There was a story behind it, one that clearly mattered to the waitress. The insult wasn't just rude, it was revealing. What the Heiress didn't know was that her careless cruelty had just drawn the attention of a man who had the power to change lives overnight. But would he step in? And if he did, what would he do? Expose her, challenge her, or teach her a lesson she'd never forget? As the air grew thick with tension, and the waitress quietly walked away to hide her pain, the billionaire leaned forward in his seat. He wasn't just watching anymore. He was deciding. And what happens next will turn this entire night upside down. The billionaire leaned back slightly, eyes following the waitress as she disappeared into the kitchen. He could still hear the soft laughter from the Heiress and her friends, like nothing had happened. He didn't know the waitress's name yet, but something about her reaction stuck with him. She hadn't snapped back, hadn't shown anger, just a flicker of hurt she tried hard to hide. That kind of quiet strength wasn't common in the circles he usually moved in. He glanced again at the pendant. It was small, a bit worn, clearly old, not expensive, but meaningful. It reminded him of something, a piece of the past. Maybe that's why it hit him differently. Most people in that room wouldn't have noticed it, let alone commented on it. But the Heiress had, and not out of curiosity, but to mock it. Her name was Vanessa, and her face was familiar to him. He'd seen it on gossip sites, at charity galas, in company board meetings. Always polished, always perfect. But here, stripped of the cameras and lights, she seemed different. Colder. She didn't know who he was. No one here did. That was the point. He wasn't dressed in designer suits or arriving in limousines. He was just a man sitting in a quiet corner watching. The billionaire, whose real name was Mason, had built his empire from nothing. He'd grown up in a tiny apartment with leaky ceilings and second-hand clothes. People like Vanessa had always been on the other side of the glass, untouchable, out of reach. Now he was on their level, maybe even above it, but he never forgot what it felt like to be invisible. That's why he'd started doing this, going undercover, seeing how people treated others when they thought no one important was watching. Tonight had reminded him exactly why he kept doing it. True character showed when status was stripped away. Back in the kitchen, the waitress leaned against the wall, blinking fast to hold back tears. Her name was Lily. The pendant had belonged to her mother, the only thing she had left after losing her to illness a year ago. She never took it off. It was a reminder, a comfort, not that anyone cared. At least, that's what she thought. But someone had noticed. And outside that kitchen door, someone powerful was already making a quiet decision that would change her life forever. Lily stepped back into the dining area, her face composed, her smile forced. She moved from table to table, taking orders, refilling drinks, pretending everything was fine. But inside, her thoughts kept circling that moment. The laughter, the pendant, the sting. She'd dealt with rude customers before. This wasn't new. But something about the way Vanessa had said it, so publicly and without a hint of shame, left a deeper bruise. At her table, Vanessa barely glanced up as Lily approached again. She waved her off like she was a nuisance, not a person. Her friends followed suit, their giggles sharp and shallow. They were the kind of people who never worried about bills or shifts that ended past midnight. Their world ran on private jets and last-minute yacht parties. Vanessa wasn't just rich, she was used to being admired, feared, and envied. That gave her power. And tonight, she'd used it without a second thought. But not everyone had looked away. Mason had stayed quiet, but he was watching everything. As he sipped his coffee, he noticed another man at the bar, mid-40s, dressed in a sleek suit, watching Vanessa's table with narrowed eyes. Not a friend, not press. There was something else about him, security maybe, or someone with a stake in whatever Vanessa was up to. Mason made a mental note. The Heiress wasn't just rude, she might be tangled in more than just bad manners. Meanwhile, back in the kitchen, Lily's co-worker Carlos pulled her aside. "You okay?" he asked, lowering his voice. She nodded, but he could tell she wasn't. He looked toward the dining room. "That girl's always looking for someone to humiliate. Last month she made Kate cry over a chipped glass. Don't take it personal." But Lily did. Not because of pride, but because that pendant was personal. Her mother had worn it every day. It wasn't about money. It was about memory. Outside, Mason's phone buzzed. A message from his assistant lit up the screen. Asterisk Vanessa Ashcroft. Tied to the Ashcroft Trust. Rumors of misusing family funds. Public image clean, but something's off. Asterisk. Mason's eyes narrowed. This wasn't just a case of a rude heiress. There was a deeper story here. One that involved power, image, and secrets no one was supposed to know. And tonight, he wasn't just going to watch. He was going to find out what Vanessa was really hiding. Mason sat still, the warm mug in his hands untouched now. He wasn't thinking about coffee anymore. He was watching patterns, Vanessa's smug gestures, the subtle glances from the man at the bar, and the way Lily moved through the dining room, trying to hold herself together. Something about all of it didn't sit right. He'd seen this kind of power play before, money used like a weapon, but there was more to this. Vanessa wasn't just showing off. She was covering something. Outside the restaurant's window, the sky had gone dark, rain lightly tapping against the glass. The place had started to thin out. A few tables remained, voices dropping to low murmurs. Vanessa was still there, twirling a spoon between her fingers, as if she owned the entire place. The man at the bar checked his watch, then looked directly at Mason, just for a second. It was enough to confirm it. He knew something. Maybe he knew who Mason was, or maybe he was watching Vanessa for his own reasons. Lily moved past Vanessa's table again. "Finally got someone to polish that necklace," Vanessa said with a smirk. Her friends chuckled, their laughs colder this time. Lily didn't stop. She just kept walking. But Mason saw it, her hands trembling slightly, her lips pressed tight. He stood up. He wasn't ready to make a scene. Not yet, but it was time to get closer. He walked to the bar and sat near the man who had been watching. "Long night?" Mason asked casually. The man gave a short nod, then paused. "You don't belong in this part of town looking like that," he said, glancing at Mason's simple outfit. "Unless you're here for something specific." Mason smiled. "Maybe I am." A pause passed between them. The man leaned in just slightly. "She's not as untouchable as she thinks," he said. "Her father's been pulling strings to keep her messes quiet, but the cracks are showing. You just saw one." Before Mason could respond, a sharp voice cut across the room. Vanessa was standing now, her voice louder than before, her finger pointed at Lily. "You don't get to ignore me," she snapped. "Do you know who I am?" Every head in the restaurant turned. The tension split the air like a crack of thunder. And in that moment, Mason knew this wasn't just about a pendant anymore. Something much bigger was about to explode. The room fell into an uneasy silence. All eyes were locked on Vanessa, standing in the center of the restaurant, her voice echoing against the walls. Lily froze where she stood, holding an empty water pitcher, her knuckles white from the grip. For a second, no one moved. Mason stayed seated, his face unreadable. He was waiting, not just for Vanessa's next move, but for the reactions of everyone else. And then it happened. The man at the bar reached into his coat. Not a weapon, a badge. Discreet but real. Mason caught a glimpse just before the man slipped it back inside. Undercover investigator. Things suddenly shifted in Mason's mind. Vanessa wasn't just a spoiled heiress, she was under watch. And this public outburst, it might be exactly what someone had been waiting for. Vanessa didn't seem to notice. Her anger was rising now, fueled by attention. People like her shouldn't even be working here, she said, pointing at Lily again. This isn't a charity. She's probably wearing stolen jewelry anyway. The words sent a wave of shock through the crowd. Mason stood slowly, his calm presence cutting through the tension like a knife. But before he could speak, a voice came from the kitchen, firm, low, and shaking with quiet fury. That pendant belonged to her mother, Carlos said, stepping into view. She worked 2 jobs to afford care when her mom got sick, and she still came here every day with a smile, while people like you treat her like dirt. Carlos had never raised his voice in front of customers before, but something about tonight had pushed him too far, and Mason could see it clearly now. This wasn't just about Vanessa insulting a waitress. This was about dignity, about people being crushed under the weight of money and power without a second thought. And then the second twist hit. The man at the bar stood and walked toward Vanessa's table. "Vanessa Ashcroft," he said quietly, showing the badge again. "We need to talk. Not here. In private." Her eyes widened, not in confusion, but in recognition. She knew this moment was coming. And Mason realized she wasn't just being watched for her behavior. She was being investigated. Whatever she was hiding, it was about to come out. And the fallout wouldn't just change her life, it might destroy it. Vanessa froze as the man with the badge stepped closer, his voice calm but unshakable. "We've been watching your financial activity for months," he said. "Tonight just gave us a little more than we expected." Her confidence cracked in an instant. Her face, once smug and polished, turned pale. Around the restaurant, whispers buzzed like electricity. Phones were out. Eyes were wide. The Heiress, so used to commanding the room, now stood small and exposed. Mason stepped forward at last, his voice quiet but steady. "I think it's time someone reminded you that being wealthy doesn't make you better than anyone else." Vanessa turned to him, suddenly realizing who he was. Her jaw tightened. "You," she started, but her words died as she recognized his face. Not from the restaurant, but from business headlines. Mason Cole, billionaire investor. Media shy, but influential. And standing right in front of her, dressed like an average man. "You've been watching me?" she asked, her voice shaking. "I've been watching how you treat people," Mason replied, "and you just showed the world exactly who you are." The investigator took Vanessa gently by the arm, escorting her toward the exit as flashes from a few discreet phones caught the moment. It wouldn't take long for it to go viral. The Heiress caught in public disgrace, under investigation, humiliated by her own arrogance. But Mason wasn't watching her anymore. His eyes were on Lily. She stood by the counter, stunned, unsure if she should feel relieved or embarrassed. He walked over to her, his tone soft. "You deserve better than how you were treated tonight," he said. "Not just because of that pendant, but because of who you are." Lily blinked, trying to understand what was happening. "Why do you care?" she asked. Mason paused, then smiled faintly. "Because I've been where you are, and I promised myself if I ever had the power to make things right, I'd use it." And then, just when everything seemed to settle, a woman stepped through the restaurant door. Mid-60s, strong eyes, silver hair. She looked at Lily and whispered, "That pendant, where did you get it?" Lily turned confused. "It was my mom's." The woman's eyes filled with tears. So was mine. And just like that, a new truth surfaced, one that would change everything Lily thought she knew about her past. The restaurant was quiet again, but the air felt different, like something important had just shifted. Lily stared at the older woman in front of her, heart pounding. "What do you mean, yours?" she asked carefully. The woman stepped closer, tears now streaking her cheeks. "That pendant, my sister had one just like it. We were separated when we were little. Foster homes, different cities. I never found her again." Her voice broke. "Her name was Marissa." Lily's breath caught. "That was my mom's name." Gasps spread quietly across the room. Mason watched, eyes softening, as something far more meaningful unfolded before him. Not wealth, not scandal, but family rediscovered in the most unexpected place. They sat down together as Carlos brought them water, and for the next hour stories flowed. Photos were shared, details matched. The resemblance, once unnoticed, was now undeniable. Lily hadn't just met a stranger, she'd met her aunt. A piece of her lost past had just been handed back, one she never knew she was missing. Vanessa, meanwhile, was gone. The headlines would come, her father's name would be dragged into questions about trust funds and false charities, and Mason knew her world would never be the same. She hadn't just hurt a waitress, she'd exposed a character flaw money couldn't fix. And now, the world would see it clearly. Before Mason left, he found Lily by the counter. She looked lighter now, like something heavy had finally been lifted. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." He shook his head. "You don't owe me anything. You stayed kind, even when someone tried to crush you. That takes strength." She hesitated, then smiled. "You're not really just a customer, are you?" Mason grinned. "Let's just say I like to see what people are really made of." Outside, the rain had stopped. Mason stepped into the night, his identity still mostly hidden, but his mission fulfilled. He didn't need applause. He just needed moments like this, where the good ones win, where kindness matters, and where even under the weight of wealth and power, humanity breaks through. In the end, a waitress stood tall, and Heiress fell from grace, and a billionaire walked away quietly, knowing he'd changed more than just one night. He'd changed lives.